bottom of page 3, we are now going to go into more detail regarding the evaluation of a function. So this fancy word, evaluating, if you evaluate a function, basically all that means is you're going to plug something in and get something out. Okay, so we're going to do a bunch of practice with that, okay? Making sure we plug something in and we get the correct output. So if we just read what we have under evaluating a function, it says the independent variable, which remember is x, the independent variable of a function acts as a placeholder. For example, the function f of x is equal to 2x squared plus 3x minus 4 can be thought of as the following statement, okay, this blue statement, okay? If you compare the blue statement to, say, this green statement right here, you can see that in the green statement, everywhere there is an x, it has been replaced by a box in the blue statement, okay? So again, the x value is nothing more than a placeholder, and so if you're evaluating a function at a number, all you're going to do is substitute the number for the placeholder. So everywhere you see an x, you're going to substitute a specific number or quantity, okay? So a function can also be evaluated for a variable quantity in the same way. Okay, so what that last statement means is most of the time, and what we're used to plugging in a number and getting another number as an output, but sometimes you can plug in more complicated quantities that have variables in them, okay, and then your answer will not be just a number, it will be a more complicated quantity, okay, but the whole idea is no matter what you're plugging in, whether it's a number or a more complicated expression, wherever x is in the original function, you're going to replace x everywhere you see it with that number or quantity and then simplify. Okay, so on page 4, we're going to do a lot of practice with plugging something in and making sure we get the correct output. So the directions here in example 4 state evaluate the function at the specified value of the independent variable and simplify. Okay, I think sometimes in algebra students struggle with language. Okay, so you've got to understand all these fancy words you see, so make sure you understand the word evaluate. If you see that somewhere, that means you're going to plug something in and get something out. If you see independent variable, don't let that bring you down. That just means x. You're going to plug something in for x and get something out. Okay? All right, if you just kind of scan through page 4, what I have here is I have this original function. Okay, f of x is equal to negative x squared plus 2x minus 4. And then I have all these boxes. Okay, if you scroll, it's an entire page of boxes. There are 8 different quantities that we're going to find. Okay, so like, for example, in part 1 here, we're going to find f of 0. Okay, when you look at this function up here, the name of this function is f. Okay, f of x is equal to, you know, this quantity negative x squared plus 2x minus 4. When you see f of 0, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, whatever, if you're looking at your original statement here, whatever's in parentheses, that is your input. Okay, so that's what your x value is going to be. Okay, so here when you see f of 0, that just means you're going to plug in x equals 0. Okay, so everywhere you see x, you're going to replace it with 0. Okay, and then you're going to simplify and you're going to get your output. Okay, so all this means is plug in 0. F of 0 means plug in 0 for x, get the output. Okay, all right, so let's plug in 0 for x. So we're going to have f of 0. Okay, again, can't stress enough, everywhere I see x, I'm going to replace it with 0. This is going to be, just follow along, negative, instead of x, I'm going to write 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 4. Okay, that's it. Now I just need to simplify. Okay, this is going to be negative 0 squared, just means 0 times 0. That's going to be 0 plus 2 times 0 is 0 minus 4. So then negative 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0 minus 4 gives you negative 4. Okay, that is your final answer. The answer is the output. Okay, f of 0 meant to take 0 and plug it in everywhere you saw an x. Okay, the final answer is going to be the output from doing that. Okay, so the answer here is negative 4. Okay, all right, let's try the next one. Okay, we're using the same original function, but now we're going to find f of 1. We're just using a different input. Okay, again, whatever's in the parentheses, that is what you're plugging in for x. So here, x equals 1. We are going to plug it into the original statement. Okay, so f of 1, everywhere you see x, you're going to replace it with 1, is going to be this. Negative 1 squared plus 2 times 1 minus 4. Okay, there you go. Everywhere you see an x, replace it with 1. Okay, I want you to take a moment and pause the video and simplify this. Tell me what this simplifies to be. Okay, and then after you do that, I want you to resume the video. All right, so hopefully you've had a moment to try to figure out what this is going to simplify to be. Okay, and my best guess is that some of you got negative 3 and some of you got negative 1. Okay, it can't be both. The answer can't be both. Okay, it's one of these or the other. Okay, let's talk about how to correctly do this. Okay, because this is like I said, this is a confusing function because of this negative sign. All right, when you look at this piece right here, okay, and I'm going to highlight it in green, this is the tricky part. Okay, see how, and even in the original function, and I'm highlighting that piece in green, that first term, the negative x squared, when you look at this, there are no parentheses. Okay, that negative is just out front. Okay, meaning there is a difference between having what we've written down and having this. I'm adding these red parentheses. We don't have parentheses. So what that means here, because there are no parentheses, is whatever is immediately touching the squared, that is what's being squared. The negative is not being squared. Now, had we had parentheses, if we had had this instead, then everything inside parentheses would be squared and the negative would be squared. But again, that's not what we have. Okay, so what this means is you would leave the negative sign out front and then you would do 1 squared, so that's 1 times 1 plus, and then I'll move on to the next term. 2 times 1 is 2, and then subtract the 4. Okay, order of operations, you've got addition and subtraction. You do addition and subtraction together from left to right. Okay, so then here, negative 1 times 1 is going to be negative 1 plus 2 minus 4. I'm going to combine the negative 1 and the 2. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1 minus 4. So the correct answer here is negative 3. Okay, if you got the other answer I expected, negative 1, that means you did negative 1 squared, the whole thing squared. You did negative 1 times negative 1 and you got positive 1 out of this green piece when you should have gotten negative 1. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. If you have trouble with exponents, okay, and you get a function like this where you're not quite sure what to do with the negative, okay, let's write it like this. Okay, so this is going to be f of x, okay, equals, again, this negative sign is out front because there are no parentheses. So you can leave the negative sign out front, okay, and then the x squared means x times x plus 2 times x minus 4. If it helps you to translate the original function or equation in this manner, then do that. We did this when we were testing for symmetry. Okay, because I wanted to avoid those exponent issues. Okay, if it helps you like it did for symmetry, then do it. Okay, if you wrote it this way, you might have an easier time of evaluating. Okay, so if I use this blue statement now, f of 1 would be negative, and then plug in 1 for x, the negative would be stay out front. You'd have 1 times 1, 1 times 1 plus 2 times 1 minus 4. Okay, this would be negative 1 times positive 1 is going to be negative 1 plus 2 minus 4. This would be 1 minus 4, which would give you the negative 3. Okay, again, the key here is you need to, throughout this course, is recognize whether or not there are parentheses in place. Since there are no parentheses here, that means that negative sign just stays out front and only the 1 is squared. All right, let's try another one. Okay, let's move on to part 3. We've got the same original function, okay, but we're going to plug in negative 1 for x. Okay, so let's do this. All right, so I'm going to use the blue statement, okay, when I kind of broke the original function down just to kind of make it easier to handle the exponents. Everywhere I see an x, I need to replace it with negative 1. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to have f of negative 1, that's going to be equal to, okay, let's read the statement. This negative 1, or sorry, this negative sign, it is out front. You need to write it down before plugging anything in, okay? I'm going to highlight this sign in yellow. It's just hanging out front, okay? So read it to yourself. You've got negative x. What's x? Negative 1, okay? Times x, which is another negative 1, plus 2 times x, which is negative 1, minus 4. This is how you would correctly plug in to this, okay? Now we need to simplify, okay? This first piece, we've got negative times negative 1 times negative 1, okay? So we've got 3 negative signs multiplied together. So negative times negative is positive times negative is negative, okay? 1 times 1 is 1. So this whole piece right here is going to turn into negative 1, okay? Plus 2 times negative 1, that's going to be negative 2 minus 4. Okay, order of operations, we're subtracting everywhere. We just go from left to right. Negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3 minus 4. That's going to give you negative 7. That's the final answer. Okay, all right, let's try the next one, part 4. Okay, we're just doing a lot of practice with this. Okay, so we're using the same original function, and part 4 is a little different than what we've seen in parts 1, 2, or 3, because now we're plugging in a variable quantity. Okay, we're not plugging in just a number. So what's going to happen here is your output is going to involve a variable. It's going to involve x. Okay, so what this means, remember, whatever is in parentheses, that's what you're replacing x with. Okay, so you're going to go to the original function and you're going to replace every instance of x with negative x, okay, the quantity in parentheses. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we are calculating f of negative x. Again, to better handle these exponents, I'm going to use the broken down part of the function, the broken down version of the function that I have in blue. Okay, again, that negative sign that's in yellow, it is just hanging out front. Okay, now I'm going to multiply that by x. Okay, so we're replacing x with negative x, and then times x. Again, you need to replace x with negative x. Okay, then move to the next term, which is plus 2x, but you're going to replace x with negative x. So it's going to be plus 2 times negative x. And then don't forget the minus 4 at the end. Okay, this is how you would correctly plug in negative x into this function. And now you want to simplify. Okay, so this is going to give us, okay, again, if we look at this first term, negative times negative x times negative x. Let's handle the sign first. So negative times negative is positive, times negative is going to be negative. X times x is x squared. I cannot tell you how many people tell me that x times x is x. It is not. X times x is x squared. So this whole first term, negative times negative x times negative x, turns into negative, that negative is just sitting out front, times x squared. Okay, The next term, plus 2 times negative x. Positive times negative is going to give you negative 2x. Okay, and then minus 4. This is your answer. This is f of negative x. If you plug in a variable, you will get a complicated expression as a result. Their answer will not be just a number. Let's try the next one.